Artur Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr. And this is one we've had circled for a while, right? This is one that when they announced it, we go, oh, not only is that a top fight, a meaningful fight, a unification fight in the division, it's a fight that is a can't miss as far as excitement and entertainment value. Like, seriously, this fight can't miss. There are just certain fights you say, like, stylistically, those two guys are going to mesh into a fight that you can't see it playing out either any other way than leather being exchanged. And let's say Beterbiev, who is a pretty healthy favorite in this fight, just overwhelms Joe Smith Jr. At least the demolition job he will do on Joe Smith Jr., if that's the case, will be fun to watch and entertaining. But when I look at the odds, and when I look at this stylistically, I really don't see it playing out either any other way than a lot of leather being exchanged. And on top of that, going later into the fight, when I always look at over-under on fights like this with punchers. And let's take Dubois versus Trevor Bryan last week. The over-under was set at 3.5, and that's just because they couldn't see Bryan taking Dubois' punishment and going later into the fight. With this fight, the over-under is set at 8.5. And that means Vegas is showing a lot of respect for Joe Smith Jr. And there's another thing they're looking at. And first of all, let's get into the main odds. Minus 800 for Beterbiev. And for people who don't bet, that means you have to bet $800 to win 100. With Joe Smith Jr., he's plus 550, which means if you bet $100 on Joe Smith Jr. and he were to win, you win 550 plus your money back. Beterbiev 100% KO percentage, 17-0 with 17 knockouts. Joe Smith Jr. 28-3 with 22 KO. So both high percentage KO percentage. Joe Smith Jr. over 70%, and obviously Beterbiev 100%, which is as high as you can get. But those odds, they obviously are confident that Beterbiev is going to win this fight. They're both around the same height, 6 foot. I think Beterbiev's a little bit under that. The reach advantage is about 3-inch reach advantage for Joe Smith Jr. Will that come in play? Possibly early in the fight. Will the fight go the distance? Yes, plus 275. No, minus 380. So Vegas doesn't think this fight's going to go the distance. And Beterbiev is minus 280 to win by knockout, which is he's a heavy favorite to win this fight by knockout. The second most likely scenario, Beterbiev by decision, plus 360. Joe Smith Jr. by stoppage is plus 900, and Joe Smith Jr. by decision is plus 1100. So the most likely scenario is Beterbiev winning by knockout. What Vegas is wondering is when will that happen? They've set the over-under at 8.5 rounds. Let's talk about that. And let's talk about that. Beterbiev has been known as a guy who will start slow. And that's what makes this fight interesting. That's a wild card here, is how much success will Joe Smith Jr. have early in the fight? And on top of that, Beterbiev is 37 years old. People sleep on that. He's up there in age, 37 years old. So at what point does Beterbiev start to show that age? And he's a guy who hasn't been very active in his career. I believe he fought like once in 2017, once in 2018. Didn't fight in 2020. Obviously, the pandemic was going on. But a guy who hasn't been terribly active. I think he fought twice in 2021, got back to full-time fighting. So you got to keep all that, take all that into consideration. But I think Vegas has priced all this in and is saying they believe Joe Smith Jr. is going to have success early in the fight, which makes sense. The thing with Beterbiev is he might not stick out on film. Like, you might not watch Beterbiev fight on film and say, oh, that guy's technical, or he doesn't look like much. He looks slow early in fights. But the thing is, there's a difference between theoretical and real life. And when you get in with this guy, I believe there's a point in the fight when, yes, you have success with him early in the fight, but then he starts to hit you. He catches you with a shot. Then he catches you with another shot. And you feel how heavy those hands are, and you're like, oh, This is why this dude is considered that dude. I believe Beterbiev is that type of fighter. If you look at their stoppages recently, Beterbiev's last 3 stoppages came in the 10th round, 10th round, and 9th round. So all of his stoppages are coming late. And I believe that's why they set the over-under at 8.5. And furthermore, if you look at Joe Smith Jr., I believe 6 out of his last 7 fights ended 9th round or later. And I think 4 of those were by decision. 2 decision losses, 2 decision wins. Hasn't lost by knockout in 12 years. That's his only knockout loss, was stoppage loss was 12 years ago when he was very early in his career fighting a 6-rounder. So Joe Smith Jr. has a hell of a chin. Beterbiev, a slow starter. Beterbiev, a guy who has been stopping guys late. Joe Smith Jr. and his stoppages, only one of his last 7 fights, he stopped the guy in the 1st round. Other than that, all of his fights went later into the fight, either by decision or late stoppage victory. So these guys are getting late stoppage victories late in their fights. So I'm looking at that over under 8.5, and I think it's priced right. It's tough to find value in this fight because it's tough for me to envision a scenario in which this doesn't become target practice for Beterbiev late in the fight. I don't know if this is going to go rounds. It's just tough to envision a scenario in which, with these guys trading so much leather and Beterbiev being as big of a puncher as he is, it's tough to envision it going 12 rounds. So the official prediction will be tomorrow or later on today on this channel, and look for the betting odds article below in the preview for this below in the comments section. I'll be dropping that later on today. But I think that over under is priced right. It's tough to find value here, but just tough to find value in these odds. Because I look, this is setting up for a Beterbiev late stoppage. But those are the odds. God bless.